Our next technique is called texturing. Once again, I'm going to cut out a little piece of paper. To create textures, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. One easy way is to make little folds in the paper. Now, if you wanted to score this first, you could, but this paper's thin and it seems like it's cooperating all right. And then I want to cut into where I have folded it. Let me see if I take another little scrap of paper, you can see where the fold line is, because I want to make a couple of points here. First of all, I want to cut in at an angle. If I cut straight in, I'm not going to get any texture. So I need to cut in at an angle like this, and I don't want to cut so far that I'm cutting across the edge there. I think it was a little hard to see before. So I'm just going to leave this colored paper in here so you can see. And I'm going about every 1/4 inch. And not to cut through the end. So then when I straighten this out, I've got a bunch of little V shapes here. And I can take my finger and fold those little V shapes up. And depending on what color is behind it, it'll create a different effect. So if I have this yellow behind it, you can kind of see that. If I have a darker color behind it, you can see that. Notice that I didn't leave them folded all the way up. I kind of did that automatically without describing it. I didn't want them folded all the way up. I don't want it to look like a series of triangles. I just want it to look like texture, and so I brushed them down again. If you want the bottom color showing through more, have at it. Now, one line of this doesn't really make a whole section of texture. If I was making a section of texture, say, you know, the bark of a tree or the side of a fish or something, I would be making more rows. So, you know, the first little fold was just the beginning of it, and then I can continue in the same way. I don't want to cut over so far that I'm cutting into my next row. And again, this is just the beginning of what you can do with texture. As long as I'm not cutting a straight line in, I can cut pretty much anything and have it come out looking like texture, right? So for example, if I didn't want them to be this pointy, if I wanted something more like fish scales, I could fold it here. And then again, cutting straight in is not great, but if I cut straight in and then curve, so I'm cutting like a little hook there. And then when I fold those up, this is why you can't, if I just cut straight in, I'd have nothing to fold up. And I fold those up, lay it down here. This looks a little bit more like fish scales or something like that. Sky's the limit. You can do anything other than cut straight in at a 90-degree angle to the fold and get a texture. So what I would like you to do is fill a little 2-inch square of paper with texture, and then where's our handy dandy little sheet? Here's our handy dandy little sheet. Right. Wow, we're up to 10 techniques already. 10. This is our first texture technique, and it's texture cut in. Teeny tiny dots of glue just along the edge. Wow, not very teeny tiny. Put it down there. Our next technique will be texture again, but this time we're going to do texture added on. And if there's a wide variety of things you can do with texture cut in, there's an even wider variety of things you can do with texture added on. I can take any kind of paper cut in any way and create texture with it. So remember when we did the fringing? I'm not doing this quite the way we did, because when we did the fringing before, we were fringing to a specific scored line. Now I'm just wanting the little fringe pieces to make some texture added on here. And I'm doing it in a color that contrasts with the background just so you can see. And that should probably, or I can curl them around a pencil or a paintbrush. I could have curled them before I fringed them. Nothing, just a little bit curly. Ah, that one went funny. And then I'm gonna cut these off. And since I'm going to be using sort of this whole area here for my texture added on, I'm just gonna take a wet paintbrush and spread the glue a little bit so that I don't have big lumpy places of glue. Oops. And then I will set the texture on there however I like it. If you look at the example in the slide presentation that I gave you, you'll see a bunch of different kinds of texture added on. So there's like little paper wads, there's little squares of paper, anything you can do to make the paper stand up and create a texture on top of the surface of your other paper is legit. So that's our texturing. Texture cut in, texture added on.